We're talking today about the chemical reactions that make polymers or break them down. And we'll start with how polymers are made. First of all, a polymer, poly means many. So this is a big molecule made by a bunch of small little units going together. So how are polymers made? By stringing together many monomers. And so you might have glucose, which is a monomer, and you add another glucose molecule and another. These are all monomers, and because they're carbohydrates, they're not just the generic monomer, they're the special monomer for carbohydrates, which is called a monosaccharide. And you put all those monomers together, and you'll pretend I drew more here, because you're going to end up making this polymer. So I didn't quite balance my equation here. But this is a polymer, which is many monomers linked together. This process is called dehydration synthesis. So when you dehydrate something, you're taking water out, and synthesis means to make. So you're making something by taking water out. So dehydration is to take out water, and synthesis means to make. Another term you can use that's sometimes used is a condensation reaction. When you're condensing water out of air, you're taking water out of air, so that's another example. So this forms polymers by combining monomers and removing water. So let's actually look at this so you understand what is happening. So you have a monomer and another monomer, and together they're making a dimer, and you want to add this other monomer on. Most of these monomers have an H sticking out and then an OH sticking out, and this might be an OH, but you're only going to take the H off. So if you take the H off of this and the OH off of this, you're going to make HOH, which is water. So you just removed water to stick these two things together. Here's another example. Here's the dehydration synthesis of a disaccharide. So you've got a monosaccharide and another monosaccharide. Here you've got the OH, and here's another OH that you'll find on sugars. Take the OH off this side and the H off this side, and you'll have a carbon bound to an oxygen, and then you'll bind that to the carbon. So let's take a look at that. This process joins two sugar molecules to make a double sugar. You've got the H on that side that you take off, and the OH on this side, and then you'll connect this carbon straight to that oxygen. And you'll form water. So I can't imagine why orange would be bored with this. And so what you end up making is this carbon attached to that O, attached to that carbon. And so if you remember what this looked like before, this was attached to an O, which was this O. Maybe I should have written. And anyway, this was attached to an OH when they were separate, and this one was attached to an OH. And what you did was get rid of this H and get rid of this OH. And now that O is really this one, and it's connected right to that carbon. So we can erase that O and draw it again as the O here. And this was always attached to that one. Now here's the new bond attached right in there. And the reverse happens. How are polymers broken down? And so if you took out water to put monomers together, you're going to actually add water in to break them apart. So you break off the monomers. So this is the simpler part. You've got a polymer, and you break a bond here, and you break a bond here, and you break a bond here, and you're releasing individual monomers, or in this case monosaccharides, the monosaccharide glucose. And if you kept going, you'd get even more glucose molecules. So again, how exactly does this happen? And the answer is hydrolysis. Hydro means water, lysis means to break. So you're breaking these big molecules by putting in water, which is the opposite of what we did in the last reaction. So hydro means water, lysis means to break apart. So this separates monomers by adding water. So let's take a look at what that means. Here's a monomer and another, oh sorry, this whole thing is a polymer, but it's made out of these monomers. And so you're going to stick water in here. So what you've got is a carbon, bound to an oxygen, bound to a carbon. You'll break this bond and add one of the OH. You'll add an OH onto this side, and you'll add an H to that side. So let's see what that looks like. So one of the H's goes here and the OH goes here. And there would already be an O over on this side. So cells break down polymers. Cells break down macromolecules by a process called hydrolysis, which means adding a molecule of water and breaking it apart. So here's the breaking down of a disaccharide. A disaccharide is when you have di means two, when you have two sugar monomers added together, so that's a disaccharide. Here's your O, and so let's imagine that O is this O. You take this H2O, which is really HOH. If that O is this O is this O, then you can add this H right to here, and you add this OH right to there, and all done. You've broken apart the molecule. Okay, so that's scary for some people. Sorry. All right. And so that's really how you break apart any kind of molecule of this type. And that's the end of my story.